Hi, everyone. We're back here looking at another set of tools today. Today we're going to look at the Smudge, Sharpen, and Blur tools. I'm using a painting like this, or sorry, a picture like this, because I thought the best way to use this tool, because it has a bit of an artistic flair, is to show you guys how to kind of turn this picture here into a bit of a painting. It doesn't express explicitly how the Sharpen tool actually works, but you'll get the idea as I go. So to begin, just remember that we want to come down to our photo bin, and we want to make a duplicate of our original so that we're all set up and ready to do the before and after later on. So I'm going to call this after and hit OK. So I'm going to work on after. I just got to zoom back in with Alt and mouse wheel. And up here, I'm just going to unlock the layer by creating a duplicate layer called background copy. And that's the layer we'll work on, okay? So we can toggle our eye to see our visual effects. So the idea here is you have three tools involved. The Sharpen tool will sharpen detail. So if there's sort of a blurry aspect to this image somewhere, the Sharpen with the appropriate strength here will actually make that blurriness go away and kind of sharpen the image. There are a few other ways to do this. You can do it under Quick Edit. You can also go under Enhance, and you can do an auto sharpen idea here. And you could adjust sharpness and sort of manually do it here. The other thing, though, is that with Sharpen, you get a few other options down here, like light, darken, hue, saturation, color, things like that. So the expert mode Sharpen tool gives you the best options. You can do them, relatively quickly for the whole image in this enhance menu. But for the purpose of this, you're not going to be able to use that. So let's just zoom in a little tiny bit more. Okay, so I'm going to start by what we want to do is this is a photograph of tulips, Canada, big tulip festival in Ottawa every year. I have my brush on a blurry setting here. I'm going to want to keep it that way. Anywhere down around here is good. My brush size is about 600. I'm going to lower it. I want to keep it relatively kind of the size of a flower or less. I'm going to be adjusting my brush a lot using the square brackets on my keyboard, as you can see. Strength right now, I'm going to start with 90. I might adjust it too. So the idea here is how do I make this photograph look like a painting instead? I start by blurring most of what's on it. So I'm not going to do one big, huge circle blur. I need to do a blur in the direction of each building, the direction of each tulip. So I just gradually start blurring. As you can see, it's having that effect already, starting to make it look a little bit of sort of sleepy. The building behind as well. And as I go through these little spots, I'm going to adjust my brush size, right? To get down there in between, foreground blurriness, and generally blurring up the sky and bringing it down around as I go. So I'm just sort of giving it a softer feel. You can do the same thing under filter, and we go under blur here. You can do surface blur, just general blur, and you can adjust your toggle. For the purposes of this, we want to show the tool, so we're using the tool. The surface blur doesn't let you do each individual aspect of the picture. It'll put a blur on the whole thing for you, unless you pre-select an area. So I don't imagine you'd want to pre-select every tulip in this picture. So I'm just coming down and just sort of softening the edges of all the tulips and all the background detail, just to get it, the tower here, getting it a little blurry. Make sure I don't miss any aspect of the picture, right? And I'm just going to do the clouds over here. I'm just moving it around and holding the left mouse button down. And as we go, we're getting there. Make sure that's inside's all done. Foreground, all the tulips are finished. And I'm going to toggle my on-off so you guys can get an idea. You see the idea right there. So if you want an example of Sharpen, this would be what the Sharpen tool would have done to a blurry photo. And now you see the Blur tool doing this to a sharp photo. So there's my before and after so far. Okay, so onwards and upwards, we're going to start with the smudge tool. Strength, just one important thing I should say. If you have multiple layers, you want the blur tool to sample all layers if you're trying to penetrate those layers and make sure it affects the whole picture. Under the smudge tool, I just select finger painting. It just makes it, I'm going to go sideways here on some of these stems just to make them look a little bit more like they were painted, a little unsteady hand. So my strength's around 33%. That should be okay for now. But if I click too much, I'm going to get those white patches. So as you can see, I'm dragging it. I'm kind of pulling it. I can swirl it if I wanted to, pull the edges out a little bit. And then when I get to the stem, I'm just kind of going through it like that. I'm going to lower this just a little bit. So it just lets me, smudge everything a little bit, give it a kind of a painting look. I'm following the stems of the flowers too. I'm not going across them. I'm going in the direction that they go, and I'm doing a little bit of a shake to the cursor just to give it a little watercolorish kind of feel. Again, remember the objective here is to make this look like a painting. So I don't want to miss anything. I'm stretching the flower petals out a little bit. When it comes to the building, I'm just small, subtle little twists and turns. And you just keep doing it nice and gradually. Pull those edges out, make it look a little unsteady. As you can see, we're getting there. And then the tower, when I get that done. And chimneys and the clouds, I can swirl the clouds if I want. If it's a true smudge, I can really go to town on that. Swirl those up, why not? Okay, and now I've got a super blurry, kind of smudged out look to the picture. And just the one last step, just to give you guys an idea of how these three tools work in tandem. I'm going to do a little bit of sharpening on the flowers just to give them a little more distinction. One detail the the pretend painter here may have gotten right. So just to give you an idea, I think we're almost there. And again, this is not necessarily done this quickly. I'm just used to the tool, so going through it a little faster for you. I'm going to give you a before and after now. Radically transformed. And last but not least, on that layer, I wanted to introduce you to the Sharpen tool. And the Sharpen tool will actually take my blurriness out. But now that I've smudged it all, what I'm doing is actually coming back over a little bit and just light touches, not big hard ones. Just light touches. I don't want to bring everything back into focus. I just want to get rid of a few of the, too dreamlike kind of aspects. So sharpen that. As you can see, I'm sharpening the tower. I'm just doing it a little excessively here so you can see how that brings it back. So you have to be careful with this tool because you can kind of burn that image a little bit. So I'm going over the clouds just a tiny bit, just to give it that painting-like feel. Just down in here. I do a lot of it down in all the busyness down here because it catches edges of things a lot better. And it gives me that sort of look that I'm getting here. So in the end, I will toggle off. I just did a little too much there, so I'll just go back up my history, find that area. Okay. So I will do another before and after for you. Look at that. So there is the Blur, Sharpen, and Smudge tool at their best. The Smudge tool is kind of an artistic flavor. So I've seen it most often used just to create that sort of smudged effects, and people do waves with it and things like that. So to get rid of all the contrast and all the details of what's behind it. Smudge tool would be used to kind of Blur tool would be used to kind of create a depth of field effect. So for example, somebody in the foreground and you want to blur the background a little bit to focus on the foreground, they would blur around that individual, or they would select the individual with their select tool and maintaining that, and they would blur behind it. So you get that kind of idea. And sharpen would be to, in a close-up photo, flowers, something like that. Maybe there's a butterfly or a bee in the picture. You want to sharpen the insect and blur a little bit the flowers around it to make that poignant, sharp aspect. You could do that too. For example, right here, if I wanted to sharpen up this flower, and keep the others in their space, I should say, as a blurry flowers. And again, protecting detail protects the detail around it. So if you're working on something really intricate, protect detail is an option you definitely want to have selected. But just brings it more into focus. Maybe I do along the stem here, just to give you an idea. Just brings a little more sharpness back to the image. Okay, so that is the Blur, Sharp, and Smudge tools at their very, very best.